The day my parents publicly disowned me at our family reunion, I stood frozen among relatives as my father's voice boomed across the garden. "You're no longer part of this family. Your choices have disgraced us all." 7 years later, I watched their expressions shift from contempt to disbelief as they sat across from me in the bank's conference room, slowly realizing that the financial advisor they'd come to beg for mortgage assistance was actually their estranged daughter, who now owned their debt. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Before we continue with this story, comment below where you're watching from. If this resonates with you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's video reveals how I transformed my greatest rejection into an unexpected opportunity for healing that none of us saw coming. The certified letter from Westridge Law School arrived on a brilliant October morning. The thick cream envelope with its embossed seal stood out among the bills and advertisements in my cramped apartment mailbox. My hands trembled as I carefully opened it, though the online portal had already shown my acceptance 3 days earlier. Dear Ms. Elena Reyes, we are pleased to inform you that you have been accepted to Westridge University School of Law with distinguished merit for the upcoming fall semester. The words blurred through tears of vindication and relief. 4 years of relentless work, maintaining a perfect GPA while balancing 2 jobs, volunteering at the Community Legal Aid Center on weekends, and sacrificing every semblance of a social life had culminated in this moment. The merit scholarship would cover approximately 70% of the tuition. The remainder I would need to finance through student loans and the modest savings I'd accumulated working as a paralegal at Dawson & Mitchell since graduating with my bachelor's degree. It wasn't a full ride, but it was enough to make my dream viable. I clutched the letter to my chest and spun around my tiny kitchen, nearly knocking over the collection of mismatched mugs on the counter. Westridge wasn't just any law school. It was consistently ranked among the top 15 in the country, with one of the most respected criminal justice programs. Its graduates went on to prestigious positions at major firms, judicial clerkships, and public interest organizations nationwide. This acceptance represented everything I had been working toward since I first stepped into a courtroom during a high school field trip and felt something click into place inside me. My phone buzzed with an incoming call. My best friend Zoe's name flashed on the screen. "Well," she demanded without preamble. "I'm in," I breathed, the reality still sinking in. With the distinguished merit scholarship. Zoe's scream of excitement was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. I knew it. I absolutely knew it. Elena Reyes, future legal badass, is officially on her way. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself laughing as the tension of months of waiting finally dissolved. "I can hardly believe it's real." "Oh, it's real," Zoe assured me. "And we are celebrating tonight. No excuses, no rain check. I'm picking you up at 7, and we're going to toast your brilliant future properly." After hanging up, I scrolled to my parents' contact information. Despite our strained relationship, this news felt too significant not to share. My finger hovered over the call button for several seconds before I finally pressed it, heart pounding, with a mixture of hope and apprehension. My mother answered on the 4th ring, her voice carrying its usual blend of formality and subtle disapproval. "Elena, this is unexpected." "Hi, Mom," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "I have some good news I wanted to share. I've been accepted to Westridge Law School with a substantial scholarship." The silence that followed lasted just long enough to dim my excitement before she responded. "Law school? I see." "It's one of the top programs in the country," I added, already defensive. "The scholarship covers most of the tuition." "I assume you'll be taking on debt for the remainder?" Her question carried the weight of past arguments. "Some, yes. But the career prospects with a Westridge degree." "You know how your father feels about debt," she interrupted. and about your continued insistence on this law career instead of joining the family business. The family business, Reyes Property Management, had been the source of tension between us for years. My father had built the company from scratch, after immigrating from Mexico in his 20s, establishing a modest empire of apartment complexes and commercial buildings across the Southwest. From childhood, it had been assumed that my brother Marco and I would eventually take over, continuing my father's legacy. Marco had embraced this destiny, joining the company straight out of his business administration program. I, however, had different aspirations, ones that my traditional father struggled to understand or accept. Mom, this is an incredible opportunity. I thought you and Dad might be happy for me. Another pause. The family reunion is this Saturday at Uncle Raphael's ranch. Your father's siblings are coming in from Tucson and Mexico City. This would be a good time to discuss your plans in person. With everyone together, your father might be more receptive with family around. Her suggestion sent a wave of unease through me. Previous family gatherings had often devolved into tense standoffs between my father and me. But perhaps with this concrete achievement, acceptance to a prestigious law school, he might finally see that my path had genuine merit. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I'll be there, I promised, clinging to a thread of optimism. Good. I'll tell your father you called. She hesitated, then added, Congratulations on your acceptance, Elena, before hanging up. It wasn't the enthusiastic response I had hoped for, but it was something, a small acknowledgement that felt like a possible opening. The following Saturday dawned clear and warm, typical for southern Arizona in October. I dressed carefully for the reunion, selecting a modest navy blue dress that projected professionalism without appearing stuffy. The acceptance letter from Westridge was tucked into my purse, tangible evidence of my achievement. Uncle Raphael's sprawling ranch house buzzed with activity when I arrived. Cousins chased each other across the expansive lawn while aunts clustered, around tables laden with tamales, enchiladas, and my grandmother's famous tres leches cake. Uncles gathered near the outdoor grill, beer bottles in hand, debating politics and sports with equal passion. My brother Marco spotted me first, breaking away from a conversation to enfold me in a bear hug. At 32, 4 years my senior, he had grown into a spitting image of our father, right down to the confident set of his shoulders and the signet ring bearing the Reyes family crest. There's my brilliant little sister, he said, genuine, affection warming his voice. Despite our different paths, Marco had always been my strongest ally within the family. Mom mentioned your big news. Westridge, huh? That's seriously impressive, Lena. Thanks, I said, relaxing slightly at his support. Is Dad here yet? Marco's expression grew careful. Yeah, he and Mom are on the patio with Uncle Raphael. He hesitated. Maybe ease into the law school thing? Dad's been stressed about the Silverdale property deal falling through. I nodded, appreciating the warning. The Silverdale commercial development had been my father's focus for months, a major expansion opportunity for Reyes Property Management. Making my way through clusters of relatives, I accepted congratulatory kisses from aunts who had heard about my acceptance and deflected questions about whether I had met a nice young man yet, with practiced grace. Family gatherings were exercises in navigating complex expectations. My parents sat with Uncle Raphael and Aunt Claudia under the covered patio. My mother spotted me first, her posture straightening as she gestured me over. At 59, Mariana, Reyes remained striking, her silver-streaked dark hair pulled back in an elegant chignon, her movements precise and deliberate. Elena has arrived, she announced as I approached. My father looked up from his conversation, his expression inscrutable. Francisco Reyes had built his reputation on being impossible to read in business negotiations, And he applied the same reserve to family interactions. At 63, he remained imposing, broad-shouldered and straight-backed, with penetrating dark eyes that had instilled respect and fear in employees and children alike throughout my childhood. "Elena," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "You're late." "Traffic on the I-10 was backed up," I explained, leaning down to kiss his cheek. He accepted the gesture without returning it. "Hello, Dad, Mom, Uncle Raphael, Aunt Claudia. It's good to see you." Small talk flowed for several minutes, polite inquiries about health, work, and local happenings. I could feel the weight of my acceptance letter in my purse, waiting for the right moment to share my news. When a brief lull fell in the conversation, Uncle Raphael turned to me with genuine interest. "Mariana mentioned you've received some exciting news about your education, Elena. A law school, was it?" This was my opening. "Yes," I smiled, trying to contain my enthusiasm to a level my father might find acceptable. "I've been accepted to Westridge Law School with a distinguished merit scholarship. It's one of the top programs in the country for criminal justice." Aunt Claudia made an impressed sound. "Westridge? That's a very prestigious institution. My colleague's son applied there 3 years running before getting in. You must be very proud, Francisco." All eyes turned to my father, whose expression had darkened perceptibly. He took a measured sip of his drink before responding. "Elena has always had academic abilities," he said carefully, "but intelligence without practical direction is of limited value." The temperature around our table seemed to drop 10 degrees, my mother's eyes fixed on her lap. "I'd say becoming a lawyer is a very practical direction," Uncle Raphael offered, clearly trying to ease the tension. "Very respectable profession." My father's jaw tightened. A respectable profession that requires taking on substantial debt when there is a thriving family business that needs her talents and would provide immediate financial security. "The scholarship covers 70% of the tuition," I interjected, working to keep my voice steady. "And Westridge graduates have an employment rate of 94% within 3 months of passing the bar. The investment is sound." "Investment." My father repeated the word with thinly veiled disdain. "You talk about investing in this law degree when you could be investing in your family's legacy. Something real, something tangible that your grandfather sacrificed everything to help me build." The familiar argument was unfolding exactly as I had feared. I pulled the acceptance letter from my purse, offering it to him. "Dad, if you'd just look at the opportunities this opens up." He did not take the letter. "I'm aware of what law schools claim to offer. I'm also aware that the legal market is oversaturated, that many graduates work punishing hours for years before achieving any real success. Meanwhile, Reyes Properties needs leadership for our expansion into the Denver market now." "Marco is already handling Denver," I pointed out. "He's doing an excellent job from everything I've heard." "A business of our scale requires multiple family members in leadership, people we can trust implicitly. Your cousin Ricardo has expressed interest in stepping into a director role if you persist in this detour." The threat was thinly veiled. Ricardo, my father's nephew, had been circling the family business for years, making no secret of his ambition to claim the position my father had been holding for me. "This isn't a detour, Dad. This is my career path, my passion. I thought you of all people would understand pursuing a dream, building something of your own." A dangerous flash appeared in his eyes. "Do not compare your situation to mine. I immigrated with nothing, worked 16-hour days unloading trucks while taking night courses, saved every penny to buy my first property when everyone said it was impossible. I did not have a father offering me a prosperous business on a silver platter." His voice had risen enough that nearby conversations paused. Family members glanced our way before politely pretending not to notice the brewing confrontation. Shame and anger battled within me as I felt the weight of their attention. I'm grateful for everything you've built, I said, struggling to maintain composure, and for all the opportunities you've given me. But I need to follow my own path, even if it's different from what you planned. My father set his glass down, with deliberate care. Your own path shows remarkably little consideration for this family's needs and your responsibilities within it. Francisco, my mother murmured warningly, placing her hand on his arm. Perhaps this isn't the time. He shook her hand off. No, Mariana, I've been patient for years, indulging Elena's fantasy of becoming a lawyer while holding her position in the company. But decisions have deadlines, and this has reached its limit. The finality in his tone sent alarm signals through me. This was escalating beyond our usual circular arguments about my career choices. What exactly are you saying? Dad? He looked at me directly, his expression hardening into something I'd never seen directed at me before. The look he reserved for business competitors who had crossed him. I'm saying you have a choice to make today, Elena. Either commit to Rhea's properties and your family obligations, or pursue this law school path. You cannot have both. The ultimatum hung in the air between us. From the corner of my eye, I could see Marco moving toward our table, concern evident on his face as he assessed the situation. You're asking me to choose between my dream career and my family? That's not fair. Life isn't fair, he responded coldly. It's about priorities and values. Your choices reflect what you truly value. I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the tide of emotion threatening to overwhelm me. I value this family more than you know, but I also value being true to myself and my calling. I've worked incredibly hard for this opportunity. And we've worked incredibly hard to build something for you to inherit, he countered. Your grandfather worked himself into an early grave establishing our first foothold in this country. I've spent 40 years expanding that legacy. Also, you and Marco would have security and purpose. The weight of generational expectation pressed down on me, like a physical force. Around us, the family reunion continued, but our little corner had become a bubble of tension that no one dared approach, save for Marco, who now hovered at the edge of our group with growing alarm. I appreciate that sacrifice more than I can express, I said carefully, but forcing me into a role that doesn't align with my strengths and passions wouldn't honor that legacy. It would waste it. Something shifted in my father's expression, a hardening, a closing off. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to a dangerous quiet. If you pursue this law school path, you will do so entirely on your own. No family, connections, no financial support, no position waiting if you fail. And make no mistake, the odds are against you succeeding. My mother gasped softly. Francisco, surely we can find a compromise. There is no compromise on family loyalty. Mariana. His gaze remained fixed on me. Elena needs to decide where her loyalties truly lie. The moment stretched between us, a crossroads I had always feared would come but somehow hoped to avoid. My acceptance letter still lay on the table between us, untouched by my father. I love this family, I said finally, my voice barely above, a whisper. But I need to follow this path. I've earned this opportunity, and I believe I can make you proud through it, even if you can't see that possibility right now. My father stood abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the stone patio. The sound drew attention from throughout the gathering, conversations dying as relatives turned to witness the unfolding drama. Then you have made your choice, he announced, voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. And you are no longer part of this family. Your choices have disgraced us all. Gasps rippled through the assembled relatives. My mother covered her mouth with trembling fingers. Marco stepped forward, his face pale with shock. Dad, come on, that's way out of line. Stay out of this, Marco. our father commanded without looking at him. Elena has chosen her path, and it does not include Reyes Properties or this family. The public denouncement struck like a physical blow. Blood rushed to my face as I became acutely aware of dozens of eyes fixed on me. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, all witnessing my excommunication from the Reyes clan. "You don't mean that," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "You're angry, but you can't just disown me over a career choice. I've indulged your rebellion for years, hoping you would mature into an understanding of your responsibilities. That ends today." He turned to address the shocked gathering. "Let it be known that Elena has chosen to separate herself from this family's values and obligations. She will proceed on her path without the Reyes name or support." Uncle Rafael stepped forward, placing a hand on my father's shoulder. "Francisco, hermano, this is too harsh. The girl wants to become a lawyer, not a criminal. Many families would be proud." My father shrugged off his brother's hand. "My decision is final." He turned back to me, his expression carved from stone. "You should leave now." The finality of his words left no room for further discussion. Numbly, I gathered my purse, the acceptance letter still lying rejected on the table. As I stood, my mother reached for my hand, squeezing it briefly, small gesture of comfort she dared offer despite my father's decree. "Mom," I whispered, a plea for intervention she couldn't or wouldn't provide. She simply shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. The walk from the patio to my car passed in a blur of whispered comments and pitying glances. Marco caught up, with me halfway across the lawn, pulling me into a fierce hug. "He'll cool down," my brother promised, though uncertainty colored his tone. "This isn't the end, Lena. He's just... You know how he gets about the business. Give him time." I nodded mechanically, unable to form words around the knot in my throat. We both knew our father was not a man who changed his mind easily or admitted mistakes. His public declaration had raised the stakes beyond any previous disagreement. "I'll talk to him," Marco continued. "Make him see reason. Just focus on your law school preparations for now. This will blow over." But as I drove away from Uncle Raphael's ranch, the weight of what had just occurred settled more firmly with each passing mile. My father had not merely expressed disapproval, he had publicly disowned me before our entire extended family. The boundary he had drawn was one that would be difficult, perhaps impossible, to uncross without significant loss of face for a man to whom reputation and authority were paramount. The tears I had suppressed throughout the confrontation, finally, broke free as I pulled onto the highway, blurring the road ahead. By the time I reached my apartment, my eyes were swollen, my throat raw from suppressed sobs. Inside, I dropped my purse on the counter and sank onto my worn couch, emotional exhaustion overwhelming me. The dream of law school, which had brought such joy just days before, now carried the bitter taste of loss. To pursue it would mean truly proceeding alone, without the family that had, despite our differences, formed the foundation of my identity and security. My phone buzzed repeatedly with messages from Zoe, Marco, and several cousins, but I couldn't summon the energy to respond. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the scene at the reunion and wondering how a day that was supposed to celebrate achievement had become the breaking point of my family relationship. As the apartment darkened with the setting sun, I finally reached for my phone, scrolling past the concerned messages to find the acceptance email from Westridge Law. The words that had elated me days earlier now posed a question. Was I prepared to move forward knowing the true cost of this path? The answer came not in words, but in the quiet certainty that settled in my chest as I reread the acceptance. This was my calling, the purpose that had guided me through years of preparation. To abandon it now would mean surrendering not just a career opportunity, but my authentic self. I opened my laptop and navigated to Westridge's portal, clicking the button to formally accept my place in the incoming class. Then I began drafting emails to my landlord about terminating my lease, and to my supervising attorney at Dawson & Mitchell about my departure timeline. Outside my window, the stars emerged in the desert sky, distant, constant points of light. Whatever happened next, I would face it, guided by the same determination that had brought me to this crossroads. My father had declared me separate from the Reyes family, but he couldn't separate me from the resilience and drive that were as much my inheritance as any property or business could have been. Little did I know then, as I committed to this new solitary path, that the journey would eventually bring me full circle, to a moment of reckoning none of us could have anticipated, in a bank's conference room 7 years later, with my parents, financial future literally in my hands. The first week after being disowned passed in a blur of practical preparations. I submitted my formal intent to enroll at Westridge, gave notice at my apartment, and informed my supervisors at Dawson and Mitchell that I would be leaving for law school. My colleagues organized a small farewell gathering, presenting me with a leather-bound legal dictionary that I knew would become one of my most treasured possessions, not just for its utility, but as a reminder that some people still believed in my path. Marco called daily, providing updates on our parents' state of mind. "Dad's still furious," he reported 5 days after the reunion. "He's had Ricardo shadowing him all week, showing him the executive operations. It's pretty clear what message he's sending." "And Mom?" I asked, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. A pause. "She's caught in the middle, Lena. You know how she is. She won't directly contradict Dad, but I caught her crying in the guest bathroom yesterday. This is tearing her up." The knowledge brought little comfort. My mother's silent suffering had been a constant throughout my childhood, her passive resistance to my father's more severe decisions manifesting in small acts of kindness rather than outright opposition. It was a pattern I had vowed never to repeat in my own life, yet understanding her position didn't ease the sting of her failure to defend me. 2 weeks after the reunion, I received a certified letter from Reyes Properties' corporate attorney. Inside was a formal notice that my health insurance coverage under the family business plan would terminate at the end of the month, along with documentation canceling my position as strategic planning consultant, the nominal role my father had created to keep me connected to the business while I got the legal interests out of my system by working at Dawson & Mitchell. Most painfully, the package included paperwork removing me as a beneficiary from various family trusts and investment accounts. My father's thoroughness in excising me from the family's financial framework was breathtakingly complete. The message couldn't have been clearer. My choice had consequences, and he was enforcing them with surgical precision. That evening, I sat on my apartment floor surrounded by the paperwork, taking inventory of my true financial position. My savings amounted to $28,762, substantial for someone my age, but barely enough for first-year living expenses beyond what my scholarship would cover. My car was paid off but aging. My credit score was excellent, qualifying me for the federal student loans I would need to bridge the remaining tuition gap. The stark numbers brought home the reality of my situation, in a way emotional confrontations couldn't. I was truly on my own financially for the first time, having always had the security of family resources as a safety net, even when I wasn't actively using them. Zoe arrived unannounced at my door that night, armed with 2 bottles of wine and fierce determination. "Marco called me," she explained, pushing past me into the apartment. "Said you might be spiraling after getting some legal paperwork, so I'm here for emergency best friend intervention." Despite my emotional exhaustion, her presence brought genuine relief. Zoe had been my steadfast ally since undergraduate days, her practical perspective and unfailing loyalty a constant in my life. "It's really happening," I said as we settled on the couch with generously poured glasses. "He's systematically cutting every tie, Zoe. Insurance, trusts, everything." She nodded, taking a thoughtful sip. "Your dad doesn't do anything halfway. Never has." What if I'm making a catastrophic mistake, walking away from family security for a career path that might not pay off? Zoe set down her glass firmly. Stop. Right there. That's your father's voice in your head, not yours. She reached for the Westridge acceptance letter I'd framed despite everything. This is who you are, Elena, the girl who scored in the 98th percentile on the LSAT while working full-time, who's received a merit scholarship that hundreds of qualified applicants would kill for. Your certainty about becoming a lawyer has never wavered since I've known you. But the cost isn't just financial, she finished. I know. But here's what I also know. Staying in a role that suffocates your true calling would cost you your soul, bit by bit, year after year. She leaned forward, her expression intense. Your father is testing your conviction. He believes you'll cave when faced with real financial pressure. That's always been his measure of what matters. Her assessment landed with uncomfortable accuracy. My father's worldview had been shaped by early financial hardship, making material security his definition of success and his primary tool for controlling family dynamics. So what do? I asked, not really expecting an answer. Zoe smiled, a determined glint in her eye. You prove him wrong, not out of spite, but because pursuing your authentic path is the only way to honor the determination and principle he actually did instill in you. You become a damn good lawyer, on your own terms. The clarity of her perspective cut through the fog of doubt that had been clouding my thinking. She was right. Allowing fear to drive me back to the family business would mean surrendering the very qualities of conviction and courage that I'd inherited from my father, even as I chose to apply them differently. The following morning, I began systematically rebuilding my life plan from first principles, free from both the safety net and the constraints of family expectations. I mapped out a precise budget for the 3 years of law school, identifying areas where I could reduce expenses and potential part-time work opportunities that wouldn't compromise my academic performance. I researched health insurance options through the university, housing possibilities with roommates versus alone, and even calculated the projected cost difference between preparing meals at home versus campus dining. Every decision was weighed, not just for immediate financial impact, but for how it would affect my energy and focus for the rigorous academic challenges ahead. When Marco called that afternoon, the shift in my attitude must have been evident in my voice. You sound different, he observed, more settled. I am, I confirmed. I've spent the day making concrete plans instead of dwelling on what I've lost. It's clarifying. That's good, he said, though his tone suggested uncertainty. But, Lena, I want you to know I'm still working on Dad. Uncle Raphael and Aunt Claudia both talked to him yesterday. Even Abuela called from Mexico City to tell him he's being unreasonable. The mention of our grandmother's intervention surprised me. At 87, Carmen Reyes rarely involved herself in family conflicts, her advanced age conferring a status that placed her somewhat above the fray. What did he say to Abuela? Marco's hesitation spoke volumes. That you've chosen the Anglo path over family obligation. You know how he gets, framing everything as loyalty versus betrayal. I sighed, recognizing the familiar framework. In my father's worldview, shaped by his immigrant experience, family cohesion wasn't just emotionally important, but strategically essential. The unified front against a sometimes hostile world. My departure from his planned path wasn't just disappointing but threatened this core survival strategy. I'm not choosing against family, I said quietly. I'm choosing toward my purpose. There's a difference he doesn't see. I know that, Marco assured me. And for what it's worth, I've secured something for you. Dad doesn't know, and it needs to stay that way. What are you talking about? Your college fund, he explained. The one Abuela started for each of us when we were born. Dad instructed the family accountant to transfer your portion into the General Reyes Trust, but I intercepted the paperwork. It's about $63,000, and legally it's yours. I've had it moved to a separate account in your name only. I'll text you the details securely. The revelation left me speechless. This wasn't just financial assistance. It was active defiance of our father's explicit directive, a risk Marco had never taken before. Marco, if he finds out, then I'll deal with it, he interrupted firmly. This money was always meant for your education. Abuela would be furious if she knew he was trying to redirect it. I'm just honoring her intention. Tears welled in my eyes at this unexpected lifeline, not just for the substantial financial cushion it provided, but for the tangible proof that I wasn't completely severed from my family, despite my father's decree. Thank you, I managed finally. This changes everything. You're still my sister, Marco said simply. Nothing changes that. Just promise me one thing. Don't let his anger make you bitter. Succeed because you love the law, not to prove him wrong. His wisdom struck a chord. The danger of defining my path in opposition to my father, rather than in alignment with my authentic calling, was subtle but significant. Spite was not a sustainable foundation for the challenging journey ahead. I promise, I assured him, mentally, recommitting to pursuing law for its intrinsic value, the principles of justice and advocacy that had drawn me to the field long before it became entangled with family conflict. With the unexpected financial buffer from my college fund, I revised my budget and timeline. The additional resources meant I could focus entirely on my studies the first year without part-time work, establishing the strong academic foundation, crucial for summer internship opportunities that would shape my career trajectory. 2 months later, I stood in my empty apartment, the last boxes packed and loaded into my car for the drive to Westridge. The space looked smaller somehow, stripped of the personal items that had made it home for the past 3 years. My life had been distilled to what would fit in my modest Honda Civic: clothes, books, my laptop, and a few sentimental items I couldn't bear to leave behind. Zoe arrived to say goodbye, bringing coffee and a small package wrapped in silver paper. A law school survival kit, she explained as I opened it to reveal high-quality noise-canceling headphones, a compact French press, and a framed photo of the two of us from college graduation. For focus, caffeine, and remembering you're not alone, even when it feels like it. We hugged fiercely, both blinking back tears. I'll visit at Thanksgiving, she promised. We'll FaceTime weekly, and you'll text me after your first classes. I will, I assured her, memorizing the moment. Her unwavering support, the morning sunlight streaming through empty windows, the threshold feeling of standing between past and future. As I pulled away from the apartment complex, I glanced in, the rearview mirror at the receding buildings. Tucson had been my home for nearly all my 28 years. Leaving felt like shedding a skin, painful but necessary for growth. The city landmarks slipped past. The university where I'd earned my undergraduate degree, the courthouse where I'd first felt the calling to law during that high school field trip, and finally, in the distance, the distinctive silhouette of the Reyes Properties headquarters building downtown. I didn't stop or slow as I passed these signposts of my former life. My gaze remained fixed on the highway stretching ahead, leading northeast toward Westridge and the future I had chosen, despite the price I had paid for that choice. The journey to Westridge University took 11 hours, crossing state lines and climbing from desert into mountains. I arrived as sunset painted the historic campus buildings in gold and amber light. Gothic spires and ivy-covered brick created a scene straight from a film about hallowed academic traditions. The law school occupied one of the oldest buildings on campus, Harrington Hall, named for a Supreme Court justice who had once served as dean. Pulling into the designated unloading zone near my assigned graduate apartment complex, I was struck by the stark contrast between this elite educational environment and the practical business world my father had immersed himself in. His dismissal of academic pursuits suddenly seemed more rooted in unfamiliarity than genuine assessment of their value. My apartment was sparse but functional: a bedroom, small living area with a desk, and kitchenette shared with another first-year law student named Priya Sharma, who had already arranged her belongings with military precision. She greeted me with brisk efficiency, helping carry my heaviest boxes without being asked. "First-generation law student?" she inquired as we maneuvered my mattress topper through the narrow doorway. "How could you tell?" I asked, surprised by her perception. She smiled wryly. "The look of someone carrying everything on their shoulders. My parents wanted me to be a doctor, 3 generations of physicians in my family. When I chose law instead, my father didn't speak to me for 6 months." The revelation of this parallel experience brought immediate connection. "My father publicly disowned me at our family reunion when I refused to join the family business instead," I admitted. Priya nodded without judgment. "First-generation deviations are the hardest. They see it as rejection of everything they built." She set down the box she was carrying and looked at me directly. "For what it's worth, it gets better. My father came to my college graduation. Not with joy, but he came. That small offering of hope from a stranger who understood the specific pain of familial rejection over career choice became the first building block of what would become an essential friendship during the challenges ahead. The intensity of Westridge's law program became apparent from the first day of orientation. Distinguished professors with intimating resumes outlined coursework loads that seemed nearly impossible to manage. The competition among students was palpable. Everyone there had been exceptional in their previous academic settings, creating an environment where merely keeping up required extraordinary effort. Professor Miranda Chen, a former federal prosecutor teaching criminal law, set the tone in our first class. "Look to your left," she instructed the packed lecture hall. "Now look to your right. Statistically speaking, one of the 3 of you will not complete this program. Another will graduate but struggle to pass the bar exam on the first attempt. The legal profession doesn't need more mediocre practitioners. It needs excellence. Your job is to decide which category you'll occupy." Her blunt assessment sent a ripple of tension through the room. I straightened in my seat, a familiar determination settling in my bones. The path forward would demand everything I had: intelligence, discipline, resilience. But those were qualities I had been developing long before arriving at Westridge. My father may have rejected my choice, but he had helped forge the very strengths that would now carry me through. The first semester established a punishing rhythm. Days began at 5 in the morning with coffee and review of the previous day's notes, followed by classes, study groups, and solitary research that often continued past midnight. The workload was designed to be overwhelming, a deliberate test of prioritization skills and stress management that mirrored the demands of actual legal practice. I approached it with methodical intensity, developing systems for case briefing, creating shorthand notation for rapid note-taking, and establishing strict time blocks for different subjects. My apartment became command central for my academic campaign, walls gradually covered with outlines, flowcharts of legal concepts, and color-coded schedules. Priya, equally dedicated though, with a different approach, became my most valued study partner. Her precise analytical mind complemented my more intuitive grasp of legal principles. We established a routine of testing each other before exams, ruthlessly identifying weaknesses in each other's understanding and forcing clearer articulation of complex concepts. By mid-semester, natural groupings had formed among the first-year class. The legacy students, those with parents or grandparents in the legal profession, moved with an easy confidence born of familial guidance. The second careers, older students who had worked in other fields before pursuing law, brought practical experience but sometimes struggled with academic theory. Then there were those like Priya and me, first-generation professional students, navigating without family roadmaps but driven by powerful personal motivation. Professor Chen noticed my performance in criminal law, where I consistently provided nuanced analysis during the intimidating Socratic questioning that was her trademark teaching method. After one particularly challenging class discussion on the limitations of the insanity defense, she asked me to stay behind. "Ms. Reyes," she began when the lecture hall had emptied, "your perspective on the Stevenson case was uncommonly insightful. You identified implications that many practicing attorneys miss." "Thank you, Professor," I responded, surprised by the rare praise from someone known for sparing criticism. She studied me with clinical precision. "Your work shows unusual focus. For a first-year student, most are still finding their footing at this point." "I can't afford to take time finding my footing," I replied without thinking, then immediately regretted the candor. Her eyebrow raised slightly. "An interesting choice of words. Financial pressure?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal about my circumstances. Professor Chen's reputation for maintaining professional distance from students was well known. "Let me be direct," she continued, apparently reading my reluctance. "I'm assembling a small research team for a paper examining prosecutorial discretion in border jurisdictions. It's funded work, not substantial, but it would provide practical experience and a publishable credit. Your background in Southwest legal practice would be relevant. Are you interested?" The opportunity was extraordinary for a first-year student. Working directly with a professor of Chen's caliber would provide mentorship and connections typically unavailable until the second or third year. "Absolutely," I managed, trying to maintain professional composure despite my excitement. "Thank you for considering me?" She nodded briskly. "My assistant will email you the details. This isn't charity, Ms. Reyes. I expect exceptional work." With that, she gathered her materials and strode from the room, leaving me still processing the unexpected opportunity. The research position became another demanding element in my already packed schedule, but the substantive legal work provided context that made classroom theory more meaningful. Professor Chen proved to be a demanding but insightful mentor, pushing me to sharper analysis while providing glimpses into the practical realities of criminal prosecution. The first semester ended with final exams conducted in tense silence, blue books filling with frantically scribbled analyses of hypothetical legal scenarios designed to test both knowledge and application under pressure. I emerged exhausted but confident, having prepared more thoroughly than perhaps any other academic challenge in my life. When grades were posted, I had achieved the unthinkable for a first-year student: straight A's across all courses, placing me in the top 3% of the class. The achievement guaranteed interview opportunities with prestigious firms for summer positions and qualified me for law review, the elite student-run journal that served as a gateway to judicial clerkships and academic positions. That evening, alone in my apartment while Priya visited family for the holiday break, I allowed myself a moment of pure vindication. My phone sat on the desk, my father's contact information displayed on the screen. One call could inform him of this achievement, proof that my path had merit, that his dismissal of my choices had been misguided. My finger hovered over the call button for several long moments before I deliberately set the phone aside. This victory wasn't about proving him wrong. It was about affirming my own vision. Calling now would subtly validate his authority to judge my path, when what I needed was full psychological independence to continue building on this foundation. Instead, I called Marco, who answered with immediate warmth. "How were the finals?" he asked after initial greetings. "Top 3%, I said simply. All A's. His whoop of celebration was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "That's my brilliant sister. I knew you'd crush it." His genuine joy in my success provided exactly the affirmation I needed. Family connection without conditions or judgment. We talked for an hour, carefully avoiding direct mention of our Parents beyond Marco's brief update. Same situation. Dad's still unbending. Mom sends love secretly. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and began mapping out goals for the second semester. The exceptional first-term performance had opened doors, but maintaining that trajectory would require even greater focus and strategic decisions about where to invest my limited time and energy. One thing had become crystal clear during those first months at Westridge. I was drawn to financial law more than the criminal justice focus I had originally planned. The complex regulations governing banking, securities, and corporate transactions fascinated me on both intellectual and practical levels. This realization prompted a shift in my course selection and extracurricular targets for the coming term. As I refined these plans late into the night, I received an unexpected email from Professor Chen. Your final exam was exceptional. The analysis of the Lopez scenario demonstrated unusual insight into financial motives underlying criminal enterprises. Have you considered specializing in white-collar crime or financial regulations? Your aptitude suggests potential in these areas. Her perceptive observation aligned with my emerging interests, validating the intuitive shift I had been contemplating. I responded with appreciation and confirmed my growing interest in financial law, mentioning several specific courses I planned to target in the upcoming registration period. Her reply came minutes later, surprisingly personal from someone known for professional detachment. Financial law opens doors to significant influence over systems that impact millions. Those who understand both the letter and spirit of these regulations hold quiet power to shape justice in ways courtroom litigators rarely achieve. Consider this path carefully. I see uncommon potential in your approach. The message carried the weight of mentorship, not just academic guidance, but insight into how my particular strengths might find their highest expression in the legal profession. It was the kind of direction my father might have provided had he supported my path, making its arrival from an unexpected source all the more meaningful. That night, I fell asleep with a clarity of purpose that transcended the initial motivation of simply proving I could succeed in law school. I was no longer just surviving the path I had chosen despite family rejection. I was actively discovering how that path might allow me to create impact in ways I hadn't initially envisioned. What I couldn't yet see as snow fell gently outside, my apartment window at the end of that first crucial semester, was how this emerging interest in financial law would eventually create the perfect symmetry for a reckoning with my family history. The specialization that called to my intellect and values would, through a series of unforeseeable connections, place me directly in position to encounter my parents again, not as their rejected daughter, but as the financial authority holding the mortgage to their home and business properties in my hands. By the beginning of my second year at Westridge, my life had developed a challenging but sustainable rhythm. The brutal learning curve of first-year law school had forged new mental muscles, allowing me to manage heavier workloads with more strategic efficiency. I had secured a position on the prestigious Westridge Law Review, a distinction that opened doors to top summer internships and signaled excellence to future employers. My specialization in financial law was taking clear shape. I'd been accepted into the selective banking and securities regulation concentration, which offered advanced seminars with practicing experts and judges from financial centers nationwide. Professor Chen had transitioned from intimidating instructor to valued mentor, recommending me for a coveted research assistantship with Professor Harrington, a former SEC commissioner, whose textbook on securities law was considered definitive in the field. More unexpectedly, I had developed genuine community among fellow students who had once seemed like competitive threats. Our study group, Priya, who remained my roommate, Jackson, a former investment banker seeking to transition to regulatory law, Maya, a brilliant first-generation college graduate from Detroit, and Eli, whose family's legal dynasty had ironically left him more insecure about proving his own merit, had evolved from strategic alliance to authentic friendship. What hadn't changed was my estrangement from my parents. Marco provided monthly updates that followed a consistent pattern. Our father remained resolute in his position, refusing to acknowledge my existence in family conversations, while our mother maintained careful silence in his presence, but secretly asked Marco about my progress. "Dad took your name off the family portrait wall," Marco reported during one particularly difficult call. "Had all the photos containing you moved to storage. Mom cried for hours, but she still won't confront him directly." These updates reopened wounds that academic achievement couldn't fully heal. The pain of rejection had evolved from acute shock to a chronic ache, less overwhelming but persistently present, especially during holidays and family milestones I experienced from a distance. I channeled this complicated grief into redoubled focus on my studies and professional development. If I couldn't have family approval, I would seek validation through exceptional achievement in my chosen field. It wasn't the healthiest motivation, as my newly acquired therapist gently pointed out, but it was effectively transmuting pain into productive energy. The summer after my second year brought a breakthrough opportunity, a prestigious internship at the Federal Reserve Board's legal division in Washington, D.C. The position typically went to students from Harvard, Yale, or Columbia, making my via selection as a Westridge student particularly significant. Professor Harrington had made a personal call to his former colleague, now general counsel at the Fed, to recommend me for consideration. "This isn't favoritism," he clarified when sharing the news of my acceptance. "It's recognition of exceptional capability. You've earned this opportunity through demonstrable excellence. Remember that distinction." His words addressed the imposter syndrome that sometimes plagued me, the nagging doubt that any recognition might be tarnished by pity for my family circumstances rather than genuine merit. This clear affirmation that my achievements stood on their own provided essential confidence as I prepared to enter the high-stakes world of federal financial regulation. Washington proved transformative, professionally and personally. The Federal Reserve's legal division operated at the intersection of law, economics, and policy, addressing complex regulatory challenges that required both technical expertise and strategic thinking. My role provided exposure to confidential bank examination materials, draft regulations, and enforcement actions that shaped the national financial system. My supervisor, Deputy General Counsel Catherine Montgomery, became another crucial mentor. A pioneering woman in financial law who had navigated the male-dominated banking sector in the 1990s, she recognized something familiar in my determination. "You have the hunger of someone with something to prove," she observed one evening as we worked late, preparing briefing materials for the next day's board meeting. "It's a powerful motivator, but be careful it doesn't consume you. I've seen brilliant careers derailed by the inability to find satisfaction in achievement." Her insight cut close to a truth I had been avoiding, that no amount of professional success could fully heal the wound of family rejection. The painful reality was that part of me was still seeking accomplishments impressive enough to force my father to acknowledge his mistake in disowning me. "How do you suggest finding that balance?" I asked, genuinely seeking her wisdom. Catherine considered the question carefully. "Define success on your own terms, not in relation to others. Expectations or rejections. Ask yourself regularly, if no one ever recognized this achievement, would it still matter to me?" This simple but profound reframing began shifting my perspective. I started evaluating opportunities not just for their prestige or visibility, but for their alignment with my authentic interests and values. The subtle change made the grueling work more sustainable and personally meaningful. Washington also provided distance and perspective on my family situation. The diverse paths and complex backgrounds of my colleagues demonstrated that professional identity need not be determined by family tradition. Many of the most successful attorneys I encountered had forged unconventional routes to their positions, often navigating significant personal obstacles along the way. When I returned to Westridge for my final year of law school, I carried this expanded perspective, along with a prestigious line on my resume and valuable professional connections. The Federal Reserve experience had crystallized my career focus on the regulation of financial institutions, particularly community banks, and regional lenders whose policies directly impacted ordinary people's access to credit and financial stability. My final year brought the expected challenges of advanced coursework, bar exam preparation, and job search logistics. But it also delivered an unexpected development that would ultimately create the path to confrontation with my parents. Professor Harrington selected me as one of 3 students to participate in a special practicum with Western Regional Bank, a mid-sized institution seeking to develop innovative approaches to regulatory compliance. Our team would work directly with their legal and compliance departments, receiving academic credit while gaining practical experience with actual bank operations. The bank's headquarters were located just 30 miles from my hometown, a coincidence that stirred complicated feelings when I received the placement. I hadn't returned to the region since leaving for law school nearly 3 years earlier. The proximity to my family created both anxiety and a strange sense of fate aligning. "You don't have to accept this particular placement," Professor Harrington assured me when I expressed hesitation. "There are other banks in the program located elsewhere." "No," I decided after consideration. "The proximity is uncomfortable, but Western Regional is exactly the type of institution I want to work with, large enough to handle complex transactions, but regional enough to maintain community connection. I won't let personal history limit my professional opportunities." He nodded with approval. "Sometimes the most significant growth happens when we move toward discomfort rather than away from it." The practicum required bi-weekly trips to Western Regional's headquarters during my final semester. Each visit brought me tantalizingly close to my hometown without actually crossing its boundaries. A strange liminal space that kept family wounds partially activated, but not fully reopened. Western Regional's General Counsel, David Levinson, took particular interest in my work analyzing their mortgage servicing compliance framework. My detailed recommendations for streamlining their regulatory reporting, while improving borrower protections, impressed the executive team enough that they requested I focus exclusively on their lending operations for the remainder of the practicum. "Your approach balances compliance efficiency with genuine borrower advocacy," David commented during my midterm evaluation. "That's remarkably rare in this field, where most practitioners emphasize one at the expense of the other." His observation reflected the integrated perspective I had been developing, a recognition that financial regulations existed not just as technical requirements to be minimally satisfied, but as essential protections for vulnerable borrowers that could be meaningfully implemented without creating undue institutional burden. As graduation approached, Western Regional offered me a position as associate counsel, specializing in lending compliance and regulatory affairs. The role carried responsibilities usually reserved for attorneys with several years of experience, reflecting their assessment of my capabilities and specialized knowledge. The salary and benefits package significantly exceeded what most new law graduates could expect, even from prestigious firms. The location, however, meant potentially living within 30 miles of the parents who had disowned me, a prospect that required serious consideration. "Take 2 weeks to decide," David offered, sensing my hesitation. "It's an important decision with personal dimensions I respect." I spent those 2 weeks in careful reflection, consulting with my key mentors. Professor Chen advised considering the professional growth potential rather than geography. Catherine Montgomery from the Federal Reserve emphasized that regional banks often provided broader responsibility and greater impact than massive financial institutions. Priya, ever practical, pointed out that the compensation would allow me to repay my student loans years earlier than most law graduates. Most importantly, my therapist helped me examine whether accepting the position would represent healthy confrontation of unresolved family issues or self-destructive reopening of painful wounds. "The question isn't whether being geographically close to your parents will be uncomfortable," she observed during our session. "It certainly will be," The question is whether that discomfort serves your growth or merely re-traumatizes you without purpose. After weighing all factors, I accepted Western Regional's offer, recognizing that the professional opportunity aligned perfectly with my career objectives, despite the personal complications. The bank's focus on serving the regional community, where I had grown up, held special meaning, allowing me to indirectly support the area's development even as my direct family connections remained severed. Graduation day arrived with bittersweet intensity. I had achieved every academic goal I had set, graduating summa cum laude, receiving the prestigious Harrington Award for Excellence in Financial Law, and securing ideal employment aligned with my specialized interests. Yet the absence of family in the audience created an unmistakable void amid the celebration. Marco flew in for the ceremony, his presence a precious thread of connection to my heritage. Zoe made the trip as well, along with a few close friends from Tucson who had maintained contact despite the geographic distance. Their support created a chosen family in the seats where biological relatives should have sat. "Dad knows I'm here," Marco confided as we walked toward the law school building before the ceremony, spring sunshine warming the historic campus. Mom wanted to come too, but he threatened. Well, it doesn't matter what he threatened. She sent this. He handed me a small jewelry box containing our grandmother's pearl earrings, a family heirloom I had admired since childhood. A handwritten note in my mother's elegant script read simply, "These belong to you. I am more proud than I can say." The unexpected gift brought tears I quickly brushed away, not wanting red eyes in graduation photos. The pearls represented not just beautiful jewelry but tangible evidence that, despite her public compliance with my father's decree, my mother still considered me her daughter. I put them on immediately, drawing strength from this small act of maternal rebellion. As I crossed the stage to receive my diploma, I scanned the audience briefly, allowing myself to imagine my parents witnessing this moment. My father's stoic pride, my mother's tearful joy. The fantasy brought a complex mixture of pain and resolve. Their absence was a wound that had shaped me, pushing me toward greater independence and determination than might have developed under their approval. The weeks following graduation passed in a whirlwind of bar exam preparation, relocation logistics, and orientation at Western Regional. I found an apartment in a neutral location, equidistant between my new workplace and my hometown, belonging fully to neither sphere. The arrangement felt symbolically appropriate for my suspended state between professional advancement and familial alienation. My position at Western Regional quickly expanded beyond the initial job description. Within 6 months, I was handling increasingly complex regulatory matters and developing expertise in troubled loan workouts, the delicate process of restructuring debt for borrowers facing financial hardship. This specialization combined technical financial knowledge with genuine human impact, as successful restructuring often meant families keeping their homes or businesses surviving economic downturns. My approach emphasized finding sustainable solutions that served both the bank's interests and borrowers' long-term financial health. This balanced perspective earned respect from both the credit administration team, who appreciated my protection of the bank's interests, and the community outreach department, who valued my commitment to borrower advocacy. As I approached the 1-year anniversary of joining Western Regional, David Levinson called me into his office with unexpected news. The executive committee has approved establishing a special assets management division to handle our growing portfolio of troubled loans, he explained. Given your exceptional work in this area, we'd like you to head the legal team within that division, reporting directly to the chief credit officer. The promotion represented extraordinary advancement for someone just 18 months out of your law school. It came with a substantial salary increase, expanded authority, and most significantly, decision-making power over loan restructuring and foreclosure proceedings throughout the bank's service region. "This is premature," I protested, genuinely surprised. There are attorneys with years more experience who would traditionally be considered for this role. David leaned back in his chair, studying me thoughtfully. Experience comes in different forms. Your combination of technical knowledge, balanced perspective, and emotional intelligence in dealing with distressed borrowers has proven more valuable than simply having more years in the field. The executive team's decision was unanimous. I accepted the promotion with a mixture of pride and humility, recognizing both the exceptional opportunity and the weighty responsibility it entailed. My decisions would directly impact whether families kept their homes, whether businesses survived to make payroll, whether communities maintained their economic foundations during difficult times. The position provided access to confidential, financial information across the region, including loan performance data, property appraisals, and credit risk assessments. This comprehensive view of the regional economy revealed troubling patterns, particularly in the commercial real estate sector, where several major developers were showing signs of financial distress following ambitious expansion projects. Among the troubled commercial portfolios that landed on my desk for review was a familiar name that sent a jolt of recognition through me: Reyes Property Management. The loan file was substantial. My father's company had financed multiple properties through Western Regional, including their headquarters building and several apartment complexes. The documentation revealed a company facing significant cash flow challenges following an overextended expansion into neighboring states. They had missed 2 consecutive payments on their primary commercial mortgage, triggering internal risk alerts within the bank. My first instinct was to immediately recuse myself from any involvement with the Reyes accounts, citing clear conflict of interest. I drafted an email to David explaining the situation, my finger hovering over the send button as complicated emotions swirled. Before I could send it, however, I received an urgent message from the chief credit officer requesting an emergency meeting regarding several high-value commercial accounts at risk of default, with Reyes Properties specifically mentioned among them. The meeting convened in the executive conference room, with senior representatives from credit administration, loan servicing, and legal departments present. The chief credit officer, Jonathan Reeves, outlined the situation with clinical detachment. We're seeing concerning patterns across several of our largest commercial borrowers, particularly in development and property management sectors. The Reyes portfolio is especially troubling. Their debt service coverage ratio has fallen below 1.0, indicating inability to meet obligations from current cash flow. Their most recent financial statements show declining occupancy rates across their residential holdings and 3 failed commercial development projects. As the discussion continued, I maintained strict professional composure while processing the surreal reality. I was sitting in a confidential meeting discussing my family's business failure, a business I had been disowned for not joining, now facing potential foreclosure by the bank where my decision to pursue law had taken me. Various scenarios were presented for handling the troubled Reyes account, from immediate enforcement action to negotiated workout agreements. My input was specifically requested regarding legal implications of each approach. Our primary concern with Reyes Properties should be reputational risk, I advised, focusing on business considerations rather than personal history. They're a multi-generational family business with deep community connections. Aggressive enforcement action could generate negative publicity and damage community relationships. I recommend a structured workout approach with clear performance milestones and appropriate collateral control measures. My recommendation balanced the bank's financial interests with community impact considerations, exactly the integrated perspective I had been hired to provide. No one in the room could have guessed the personal significance of the situation to me, as I had never discussed my family background with colleagues. The meeting concluded with a decision to schedule an intervention meeting with Reyes Properties leadership to discuss restructuring options before pursuing more severe remedies. As Special Assets Counsel, I would naturally be part of the bank's representation at this crucial meeting. Elena, I'd like you to take point on the Reyes restructuring, Jonathan said as we gathered our materials. Your approach to troubled asset management has shown consistently better outcomes than traditional enforcement strategies. The assignment created an impossible ethical dilemma. Professional responsibility required disclosing my relationship to this particular borrower, yet doing so would potentially remove me from a position to positively influence the outcome for all parties. More personally, it would mean revealing my complicated family history to colleagues who knew me only as a rising legal talent. After careful consideration and consultation with a trusted ethics professor from Westridge, I drafted a carefully worded disclosure to David Levinson, revealing my connection to Reyes Properties, while emphasizing my commitment to objective handling of the matter. His response surprised me. Rather than immediately reassigning the case, he requested a private meeting to discuss the situation in greater depth. When we met the following morning, his approach was thoughtful rather than procedurally rigid. "This presents unusual circumstances," he acknowledged after we had thoroughly discussed the ethical considerations. "Typically, family connection would require complete recusal. However, your estrangement and the particular nature of that separation create a different dynamic." He steepled his fingers, considering the situation from multiple angles. "Here's what I propose. You continue managing the restructuring process with appropriate oversight from me. Your unique understanding of the company principles may actually prove beneficial in reaching a constructive resolution, provided you maintain strict professional boundaries." "You're comfortable with that approach from a legal ethics perspective?" I asked, surprised by his flexibility. "With proper safeguards and documentation of our decision-making process, yes. The rules of professional conduct require avoiding conflicts that would materially limit representation of a client. In this case, your historical knowledge could enhance rather than limit our representation of the bank's interests." His nuanced approach reflected sophisticated ethical reasoning rather than rigid rule application. We established clear parameters. All key decisions would be documented with explicit rationales. Another attorney would review all communications, and David would personally attend the restructuring meeting to provide additional perspective. As I prepared for the inevitable confrontation with my parents, I experienced a strange sense of karmic symmetry. 7 years earlier, they had dismissed my chosen path as impractical and insufficient compared to the family business. Now that very business needed the expertise I had developed through that rejected path. The meeting would represent a completion of the circle, not through vindictive triumph, but through professional service that might actually help save what they had built. The night before the scheduled meeting, I sat alone in my apartment reviewing the Reyes Properties file one final time. The financial documentation told a story beyond mere numbers, of ambitious expansion undertaken without adequate risk assessment, of a company culture resistant to external economic signals, of leadership too confident in historical success to adapt to changing market conditions. I recognized my father's characteristic patterns in these decisions, the same uncompromising certainty that had led him to disown his daughter rather than accept her different path. There was a tragic consistency to it all. Marco called as I was organizing my notes, his tone unusually tight. "Dad received the meeting notification from Western Regional," he said without preamble. "He doesn't know you work there, but he's not taking the financial situation well. His blood pressure has been dangerously high. Mom's worried." Concern for my father's health created yet another layer of complexity in the already challenging situation. "How bad is it really, Marco? The company's financial position?" He sighed heavily. "Worse than the bank probably knows. Dad overextended on the Phoenix developments, then used cross-collateralization to secure additional properties. When the anchor tenants backed out of the main Phoenix project, it created a cascading problem. He's been trying to project confidence, but we're approaching systemic failure." The information confirmed my analysis of the loan files, but hearing it from my brother made the human impact more immediate. Despite everything, I didn't want to see my father's life's work collapse or for my mother to face insecurity in what should be their retirement years. The bank is open to restructuring rather than enforcement, I assured him. There are workable solutions if Dad is willing to accept certain changes to the business model and appropriate oversight during recovery. That's the problem, Marco said quietly. You know how he is about maintaining absolute control. The idea of bank oversight feels like failure to him. He's talking about fighting any restructuring terms through legal challenges, even though our company attorneys have advised strongly against it. His stubborn resistance to necessary compromise sounded painfully familiar. The same rigid pride that had led him to disown me rather than accept my career choice was now threatening to destroy his business rather than accept reasonable oversight. He needs to understand that cooperative restructuring is his best option, I explained. The alternative isn't winning some legal battle against the bank. It's losing everything through foreclosure and potential bankruptcy. Maybe hearing it from the bank's attorneys tomorrow will finally get through to him, Marco said, though his tone suggested limited optimism. After hanging up, I returned to my preparation with renewed purpose. Tomorrow's meeting wasn't about personal vindication or settling old scores. It represented an opportunity to potentially save my family's financial foundation through the very expertise my father had dismissed. Whether he would recognize or accept this irony remained to be seen. What I couldn't anticipate as I finally went to bed that night was exactly how the confrontation would unfold, or how the seemingly coincidental intersection of our paths would reveal itself as something more profound than mere chance or cosmic irony. The bank's conference room would become the setting for a reckoning neither of us had sought, but both perhaps needed, bringing full circle a journey that had begun with rejection, but might possibly end with something approaching reconciliation. The morning of the restructuring meeting dawned with unusual clarity for early autumn, sunlight streaming through my apartment windows as I prepared with methodical precision. I selected a charcoal gray suit, conservative but commanding, with a silk blouse in deep burgundy that projected both authority and composure. My grandmother's pearl earrings completed the ensemble, a private reminder of family connection that persisted despite severed ties. The symbolic weight of the day settled around me as I gathered my materials: financial analyses, restructuring proposals, legal precedents for the terms we would offer. This meeting represented far more than a standard bank negotiation. It was the culmination of diverging paths set in motion 7 years earlier at a family reunion where certainties had shattered and new possibilities emerged from the fragments. During the drive to Western Regional's headquarters, I mentally rehearsed various scenarios for the initial moment of recognition. Would my father simply walk out? Would he demand another representative? Would he maintain cold professionalism as a mask for private fury? The uncertainty created a fluttering tension in my stomach that professional preparation couldn't fully quell. David Levinson met me in the lobby, his reassuring presence a welcome anchor in the emotionally charged situation. "You're sure you want to proceed with this?" he asked quietly as we walked toward the executive conference room. "It's not too late to bring in another attorney. No one would question the decision given the circumstances." "I'm certain," I replied with more confidence than I felt. "This needs to happen, for both professional and personal reasons." Iki nodded, respecting my decision without further question. Our prior discussions had established clear boundaries and contingency plans for various reactions from the Reyes representatives. We had the ethical bases covered. The emotional dimension remained unpredictable. The conference room had been prepared with meticulous attention to detail: pitcher of water, notepads, financial documents arranged in precise stacks. The bank's position at the head of the table signaled our authority in the proceedings, while refreshments offered a gesture of hospitality to soften the inherently adversarial nature of the meeting. At precisely 9:30, the receptionist's voice announced over the intercom, "The representatives from Reyes Properties have arrived." My pulse quickened as David rose to greet them. "Show them in, please." The door opened to reveal my father first, still, imposing at 69 despite the new stoop to his shoulders and the pronounced lines etching his face. His expression carried the guarded determination I recognized from countless business disputes throughout my childhood. Behind him came my mother, her presence unexpected as she had never participated in business negotiations before. Marco entered last, his wide eyes immediately finding mine with a mixture of apprehension and support. The momentary freeze as my father registered my presence behind the bank's table burned itself into memory, his forward motion halting abruptly, eyes widening then narrowing in rapid succession, jaw tightening visibly beneath his meticulously trimmed silver beard. My mother's hand flew to her throat, a small gasp escaping before she composed herself. "What is the meaning of this?" my father demanded, addressing David rather than acknowledging me directly. His voice, that voice that had declared me separate from the family, remained powerful despite the years, though now threaded with an undercurrent of strain. "Mr. Reyes, I'm David Levinson, General Counsel for Western Regional Bank," David responded smoothly. "This is Elena Reyes, our Special Assets Counsel who will be overseeing the restructuring discussion today." My father's eyes flashed dangerously. "This is unacceptable. There is clear conflict of interest here." I maintained professional composure, meeting his gaze directly for the first time in 7 years. "The potential conflict has been disclosed and appropriately managed according to legal ethics requirements, Mr. Reyes. Another attorney has reviewed all materials, and Mr. Levinson will be present throughout our discussion to ensure objectivity." My deliberate use of the formal address, Mr. Reyes rather than Dad, established the professional parameters of our interaction. This wasn't a family reunion, but a business negotiation with profound consequences for all parties. "We can request another representative if you insist," David offered diplomatically. "However, Ms. Reyes has developed our most successful approaches to complex commercial workouts. Her expertise would be beneficial in finding viable solutions for your current situation." A tense silence followed as my father visibly calculated his options. Pride pushed toward rejection of my involvement, but pragmatism recognized the precarious position of his company. Finally, Marco stepped forward, breaking the impasse. "We should proceed," he said firmly. "Elena's expertise is exactly what we need right now. Personal history doesn't change that fact." My mother's hand found my father's arm, a gentle pressure. That seemed to deflate some of his resistance. Without explicitly agreeing, he moved toward the conference table and took a seat, his rigid posture communicating continued objection, even as he pragmatically accepted the reality. The meeting began with my presentation of Western Regional's analysis of Reyes Properties' financial position, declining occupancy rates across residential holdings, negative cash flow from the Phoenix developments, and cross-collateralization that had spread risk throughout the portfolio. I delivered this assessment with clinical precision, allowing the numbers to speak without editorial comment. "These figures misrepresent the temporary nature of our cash flow situation," my father interjected when I finished. "The Phoenix market is experiencing a momentary correction. Our projections show recovery within 8 to 12 months. The bank's analysis indicates a more fundamental structural problem," I countered, sliding forward a comparative market study. "Phoenix commercial vacancies have increased for 6 consecutive quarters. The projected correction is actually a market realignment that could extend 2 to 3 years, particularly in the luxury commercial segment where Reyes Properties is most heavily invested." My father's expression darkened at having his business assessment challenged, particularly by me. But the thoroughness of our analysis was irrefutable, supported by data his own financial team had likely presented, but he had chosen to dismiss. "What is the bank proposing?" Marco asked, wisely moving the discussion toward solutions, rather than allowing it to stall in disagreement over the problem definition. I outlined the restructuring framework we had developed: extended payment, terms, interest rate modifications, partial deferral of principal during recovery, and strategic disposition of underperforming assets. The approach was more generous than standard bank practice, reflecting both the company's historical stability and our assessment of potential recovery under proper management. These terms come with conditions, I continued, reaching the most challenging aspect of the proposal. Western Regional would require enhanced financial reporting, approval rights for major acquisitions or dispositions during the restructuring period, and installation of a bank-approved financial controller to monitor compliance with the restructuring agreement. The oversight provisions triggered my father's immediate resistance, just as Marco had predicted. "Unacceptable," he declared flatly. "Reyes Properties has operated independently for 45 years. We will not surrender management control to bank oversight." "This isn't surrendering control," I explained evenly. "It's accepting appropriate monitoring during a workout period. The alternative is acceleration of the loans and potential foreclosure, which would indeed mean complete loss of control." My direct framing of the stark reality created palpable tension in the room. My mother, who had remained silent until now, leaned forward with unexpected assertiveness. "Perhaps we could discuss specifically what this oversight would entail in practice," she suggested, her calm voice introducing a mediating element. "What decisions would require bank approval versus notification? What would the controller's specific role encompass?" Her practical question surprised me. This wasn't the passive mother I remembered, but someone actively engaging with complex financial considerations. I realized with sudden clarity that she might understand the business far better than my father had acknowledged, or than I had ever recognized. The discussion shifted to detailed implementation considerations, with Marco and my mother asking insightful questions about operational implications, while my father maintained stony silence. The professional substance of the conversation created a strange neutral zone where my expertise could be engaged without directly confronting the personal history hanging unspoken between us. As we worked through the technical provisions of the proposed restructuring, I observed subtle changes in my father's demeanor, from rigid rejection to reluctant consideration as the practicality of our approach became evident. The plan we had developed would preserve the core business while requiring divestiture of only the most troubled assets, a reasonable compromise that respected the company's legacy while addressing its current crisis. 2 hours into the meeting, we had covered the essential components of the restructuring framework. "We'll need time to review these terms with our attorneys," my father stated, the first words he had spoken in nearly 40 minutes. "Of course," I acknowledged. "The bank can provide a 2-week review period before requiring your response. However, the missed payments and covenant violations remain active issues. This forbearance is contingent on good faith engagement with the restructuring process." As David and I gathered our materials to conclude the meeting, my father suddenly addressed me directly for the first time. "Where did you learn all this financial restructuring approach?" The question contained no warmth, but its very existence represented a crack in the wall of silence between us. It acknowledged, however reluctantly, my professional capability in an area he had once dismissed as frivolous compared to the real work of property development. "Westridge Law School," I answered simply, "then the Federal Reserve's legal division and specialized practice here at Western Regional." Something flickered across his expression. Not quite respect, but perhaps recognition that the path he had rejected had led to legitimate expertise his company now desperately needed. "We'll be in touch with our response to the proposal," he stated formally, ending the momentary connection as quickly as it had formed. As they gathered to leave, my mother paused beside me, her hand briefly touching mine. The first physical contact between us in 7 years. "The pearls suit you," she whispered, eyes bright with unshed tears, before following my father from the room. Marco lingered behind, waiting until our parents had exited before speaking candidly. "That was Intense, but you were incredible. Professional, thorough, fair. Thank you for supporting my involvement, I said. It couldn't have been easy to manage Dad's reaction. He shrugged slightly. I'm just trying to save the company at this point. If that means enlisting the sister he disowned who happens to be an expert in exactly what we need, well, that's his issue to work through, not mine. After they departed, David closed the conference room door and turned to me with genuine concern. Are you all right? That was emotionally complex territory you just navigated. I'm processing, I admitted. It was strange seeing them after so long, especially in this context, with the power dynamic so fundamentally altered. He nodded thoughtfully. You maintained exceptional professionalism. But take the rest of the day if you need it. This goes beyond standard work stress. I declined his offer, knowing that immersion in other cases would provide better emotional regulation than solitary reflection. The day proceeded with reviewing troubled loans, meeting distressed borrowers, and developing workout strategies, the normal rhythm of my position providing stabilizing structure after the morning's emotional turbulence. That evening, alone, in my apartment, I finally allowed myself to fully process the confrontation. The experience had been surreal, sitting across from the parents who had rejected me, now representing the authority that controlled their financial future. The symmetry was almost too perfect, like something scripted rather than organically evolved from our separate choices. My phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown local number. Assuming it was work-related, I answered with my professional greeting. Elena. My mother's voice came through hesitantly. I hope it's all right that I called. Marco gave me your number. Surprise momentarily silenced me. This was her first direct contact since the family reunion 7 years ago. Yes, of course, I finally managed. Is everything okay? Your father doesn't know I'm calling, she continued, voice low as if she might be overheard. But I needed to speak with you privately. About the restructuring proposal. Alarm flashed through me. This call created potential ethical complications if she was seeking preferential terms or inside information. Mom, I'm not sure I should be discussing the proposal outside of official channels. It's not about changing the terms, she interrupted quickly. It's about convincing your father to accept them. I need to understand every detail so I can help him see reason before he destroys everything out of pride. The request revealed a dynamic I hadn't fully appreciated. My mother, as behind-the-scenes pragmatist, trying to temper my father's more rigid positions. It cast our family history in a slightly different light. The proposal represents the best path forward, I confirmed carefully. The oversight provisions are standard for this situation and actually less restrictive than what most lenders would require given the severity of the financial issues. I understand that, she said. What I need is your honest assessment. If we accept these terms and fully comply with the restructuring plan, can the company recover? Or is this simply delaying inevitable failure? Her direct question deserved an equally direct answer. Based on thorough analysis, yes, the core business remains viable if properly restructured. The Phoenix expansion was too aggressive and poorly timed, but the established properties maintain good fundamentals. With appropriate management and realistic growth expectations, Rhea's properties can stabilize and eventually return to profitability. Her relief was audible in the small sigh that followed. Thank you. That's what I needed to know. A pause. Then, you were very impressive today, Elena. The way you handled the financial details, how clearly you explained everything. Your father would never admit it, but I could see it registered with him. The validation from my mother, however belated, soothed a wound I hadn't realized still ached for healing. Thank you for saying that. I should have said many things years ago, she replied, voice catching slightly. Should have done more than silently disagree with his ultimatum. That's a failure I live with daily. The conversation was veering into emotional territory neither of us was prepared to fully navigate. We all made choices based on what seemed necessary at the time, I offered, neither absolving nor condemning her complicity in my father's decree. Yes, she agreed quietly. And now we're all living with the consequences of those choices. Another pause, then. I need to go. But Elena, it was good to see you today, even under these circumstances. After we disconnected, I sat with the complex emotions her call had stirred, anger and longing, professional pride and personal hurt, all swirling together in a tempest that defied simple categorization. The boundaries between my professional role and family history were blurring in ways I hadn't anticipated when accepting the assignment. The next 2 weeks passed without further direct contact from my family. Through normal bank channels, we received requests for clarification on specific restructuring terms, all professionally framed and addressing substantive concerns rather than emotional resistance. Marco occasionally texted brief updates. Dad's considering the controller options, or Mom's fully on board with the asset disposition schedule, suggesting incremental movement toward acceptance. On the final day of the review period, I received notification that representatives from Reyes Properties would be meeting with our team to discuss their response to the restructuring proposal. I prepared methodically, anticipating potential counterproposals and developing flexibility parameters for negotiable terms while identifying our non-negotiable requirements. I expected Marco to lead their representation, perhaps accompanied by their corporate counsel. Instead, my father arrived alone, his solitary presence making him seem simultaneously more imposing and more vulnerable. "Mr. Reyes," I greeted him professionally as he entered the conference room where I waited. "I understood there would be a team from your company today." "Some discussions require direct principal-to-principal engagement," he replied, taking a seat across from me. "No intermediaries." The implication that he recognized me as a principal in this negotiation, rather than merely the bank's representative, marked a subtle but significant shift in his perspective. I noted it without comment, maintaining the professional framework that had allowed our previous interaction to proceed. "I've reviewed your restructuring proposal thoroughly," he began, without preamble. "The terms are generally acceptable, with certain modifications we can discuss. However, there's a more fundamental matter I wish to address first." I tensed slightly, unsure where this was heading. "I'm listening." He placed his hands flat on the table, a gesture I remembered from childhood when he was preparing to make a significant pronouncement. "I want to buy back our debt from Western Regional." The request caught me completely off guard. "Buy back the debt? Mr. Reyes, your company is in financial distress. That's why we're discussing restructuring in the first place. Not the company," he clarified. "Me, personally. I want to purchase the notes from the bank, become the holder of record for all Reyes Properties debt obligations." This unusual proposal raised immediate concerns. May I ask why? The restructuring offers a workable solution without requiring additional capital investment from you personally. His gaze held steady. "Because I don't want my daughter holding my debt." The blunt acknowledgement of our relationship, the first time he had directly referenced it, landed with physical impact. Even more surprising was his admission of discomfort with the inverted power dynamic between us. "The bank holds your debt, not me personally," I pointed out, maintaining professional distance despite the personal turn. "We both know that's a technical distinction. You're managing the restructuring. You would oversee compliance. You would have financial authority over the company I've built over 45 years." His voice carried no anger, just a simple statement of fact. I find that difficult to accept. The raw honesty of his admission created an opening for equally direct response. "I understand this situation is uncomfortable given our history. However, any qualified special assets counsel would require the same oversight provisions. This isn't personal." Everything between family is personal, Elena. The use of my name, rather than Ms. Reyes, subtly shifted our conversational terrain, even when we pretend otherwise. He straightened in his chair, reclaiming his customary authoritative posture. I have liquid assets sufficient to purchase the debt at par value. The bank would receive full recovery rather than extended workout. Uncertainty. I'd assume full responsibility for the restructuring implementation. The proposal wasn't entirely unreasonable from a business perspective. The bank would indeed secure immediate full recovery on a troubled loan, eliminating ongoing monitoring costs and compliance risks. However, the personal dimension complicated my professional assessment. This would require approval from the credit committee, I noted, buying time to consider implications. They would need convincing that your personal financial resources are sufficient without depleting working capital the company needs for recovery. I've prepared full documentation, he replied, sliding a folder across the table. Personal financial statements, liquidity verification, proposed transaction structure, everything you need for due diligence. As I reviewed the materials, the full picture emerged with startling clarity. My father was prepared to liquidate his retirement accounts, sell personal real estate holdings, and leverage private investments accumulated over decades, all to avoid having his company under my financial oversight. The scale of sacrifice revealed how profoundly unacceptable he found our inverted power relationship. This represents significant personal financial risk for you, I observed, looking up from the documents. The restructuring approach we've proposed distributes that risk more appropriately between the bank and Reyes properties. Some things are worth more than optimal risk distribution, he replied. The statement carried layers of meaning beyond its surface. Pride, certainly, but perhaps something deeper, something approaching respect for boundaries, however belatedly. I closed the folder, decision crystallizing. I'll present this to the credit committee with my recommendation. Given the full recovery value and elimination of ongoing monitoring costs, I expect they'll look favorably on the proposal. He nodded, the barest tension releasing from his shoulders. Thank you. The simple acknowledgement, perhaps the first, genuine thanks he had offered me in adulthood, created an opening I hadn't planned to explore but suddenly felt essential. May I ask you something not directly related to the transaction? His guard visibly raised, but he nodded permission. Why did it matter so much that I chose law instead of the family business, enough to disown your own daughter? The directness of my question hung in the air between us. For a moment I thought he might refuse to engage, retreat to formal transaction details. Instead, he looked down at his hands, strong, weathered hands that had built a company from nothing, before meeting my gaze again. Because I didn't understand it, he admitted, the words seeming to surprise even him with their honesty. Everything I built was for family legacy. Your choice felt like rejection of that legacy, of everything I had sacrificed to create security for you and Marco. It wasn't rejection, I said quietly. It was following my own calling while honoring the work ethic and determination you taught me. Different application, same core values. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite acceptance, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. You've done well, he acknowledged, gesturing to our surroundings. Built your own path. I have, I agreed, neither seeking his approval, nor rejecting it when offered. Just as you built yours. We regarded each other with new perspective. Not reconciled exactly, but seeing each other more accurately than perhaps we ever had before. Two strong-willed individuals who had taken different paths, but carried the same fundamental determination. The debt purchase will take several days to process, I said, returning to professional matters. You'll need to execute standard assignment. Documentation once credit approval is confirmed. He nodded, rising to leave. At the door, he paused, turning back with uncharacteristic uncertainty. Your mother would like to see you, outside of business matters. if you're amenable. The tentative invitation, neither pressuring nor dismissive, represented more emotional evolution than I had thought possible from him. "I'd like that," I replied simply. 3 days later, the credit committee approved the debt purchase transaction. My father arrived to execute the assignment documents, transforming him from borrower to note holder in a financial restructuring of his own design. I had recused myself from the closing process, having another attorney handle the final documentation, to maintain appropriate separation. As I watched from my office window while he exited the bank building, his posture seemed different, neither defeated nor triumphant, but perhaps carrying a new understanding of the complex legacy he had created, both in business and family. The company he had built now faced significant challenges, but its future remained in family hands, though in ways none of us could have predicted when our paths diverged 7 years earlier. That evening, I met my mother at a small cafe midway between our separate worlds. The conversation began tentatively but gradually warmed as we cautiously rebuilt connection without avoiding the difficult truth of what had happened. No single meeting could heal 7 years of separation, but it created foundation for something neither of us had thought possible: a relationship built on adult mutual respect rather than prescribed family roles. "He's changed," she said as we prepared to leave. "Losing you, then nearly losing the company, it's forced reflection he wouldn't otherwise have undertaken. He's not good at admitting mistakes, but purchasing the debt was his way of acknowledging something important." "What's that?" I asked. "That different paths can lead to valid destinations," she replied. "And that sometimes the child who walks away from the expected route might return with exactly what the family needs, precisely because they traveled elsewhere." As I drove home under a canopy of desert stars, I reflected on the strange symmetry of our journey. My father had disowned me for choosing a path he couldn't understand. That very path had led me to the expertise that now might help save what he had built. And in purchasing the debt, he had finally found a way to acknowledge my legitimate authority while maintaining his own. It wasn't the reconciliation I might have imagined in simpler terms, running into his arms with tears and forgiveness. It was something more complex and perhaps more durable. Mutual recognition between adults who had hurt each other deeply, but now saw each other more clearly. Not restoration of what was lost, but creation of something new from the painful fragments of our shared history. The journey ahead would require continued navigation of complicated emotional terrain, alongside the practical challenges of rebuilding both a business and a family relationship. But for the first time in 7 years, all paths remained open, not easy but possible. And in that possibility lay the most profound lesson of our shared experience: that even the most painful rejection could become, through persistence and growth, the foundation for unexpected redemption. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.